Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. When it comes to the world of Street Fighter, we have covered the history of various different characters from that fighting game universe. These individual character retrospectives have included looking at every single video game and media appearance that each fighter has had over the years. In today's video, it is finally time to look at the story behind the most well-known sumo wrestler in all of video games. Hell, he is probably more famous in the West than any real-life sumo wrestler too. Of course, I am talking about everyone's favourite fighting game fatty, the globular grappler, it's E.Honda. This, ladies and gentlemen, is his story. Yeah! While the Street Fighter franchise itself spans back to 1987, like the majority of the franchise's most well-known combatants, E.Honda would make his debut in 1991 Street Fighter II. The iconic fighting game full of legendary characters that would change the world of fighting games forever. E.Honda, full name Edmund Honda, was created by Akira Yasuda and Eri Nakamura, who while being worked on was simply known as Sumo. Eventually he was given the name Honda to reflect his above average strength and below average speed, traits of a sumo wrestler. The character was designed with the intention of finding popularity in his homeland of Japan, but also with the hope that his look and style of fighting would lead to him becoming popular amongst foreigners too. In order to make the character have even further appeal to overseas markets, it was decided to give him kabuki makeup. In the game's story, this was so that he could travel the world while hiding his identity but still promoting his Japanese pride. This look ended up being considered somewhat controversial in Japan, and as a result his images would be banned from being displayed at the 1992 Street Fighter II Turbo tournament that was held in a famous Japanese sumo hall. EGM reported on this at the time, commenting that his painted face was ironically considered a sacrilege to the Japanese national sport. In his debut in Street Fighter II, E.Honda would show up using his sumo wrestling based fighting style in combat. However, several of his techniques, including his trademark super headbutt, clearly have nothing to do with sumo wrestling. Ridiculous crazy moves like this are obviously prohibited in a formal sumo wrestling match. This is obviously contradictory to the original idea of promoting the sport outside of Japan. Speaking of his abilities in combat, he is also well known for his 100-hand slap, a manoeuvre that allows him to land a flurry of hits in extremely quick succession. By the Champion edition of the game, he would also gain the ability to move as he performed this attack, and in the later iterations of Street Fighter II, his arsenal of moves would be expanded to be able to perform the flying sumo smash and the smashing oak tree throw. By Super Street Fighter II Turbo, he even utilised a new move known as the Super Kill Head Ram, a massively powered up version of his super headbutt technique. To put it simply, rather than fighting with a more traditional sumo style, in reality E.Honda's moveset revolved around baiting jumps and surprising opponents with very sudden attacks. Combining this with a strong offense and defense, E.Honda can work around his lack of agility to overcome those he is fighting against. As for his place in Street Fighter lore, this would obviously begin to be built on during Street Fighter II, where he is focused on becoming known as the greatest sumo wrestler of all time. To help achieve this goal, E.Honda decides to enter the second World Warrior tournament, even feeling perturbed that the rest of the world do not have the same respect for sumo wrestlers that the Japanese have. He becomes intent on showing the world once and for all that sumo wrestlers are amongst the greatest fighters on earth. While this may seem like his main goal on the surface, E.Honda also has a further agenda with regards to his involvement in this historical event. To put it really simply, he is also present to investigate the Shadaloo organisation, a group who have been encouraging sumo wrestlers in Japan to take biochemical drugs, so hopes by entering the tournament he can bring these dealers to justice. After competing in the World Warrior tournament and witnessing the fall of M. Bison, Honda went back to his home country where he continued to compete in sumo wrestling and even running his own bathhouse. Next up for E.Honda would be his appearance in the live-action 1994 Street Fighter movie, which would of course have its accompanying games, where he would also be playable. On the big screen, E.Honda was played by Peter Twisasosopo. Really difficult name to say. In this movie that is not canon to the games, E.Honda instead serves as a technician as part of news reporter Chun-Li's crew. In the film, like Chun-Li, he too has a personal grudge with Shadaloo, who ruined his career as a sumo wrestler. In the live action piece, the climax of his arc sees him do battle with Zangief, who in this one is depicted as one of M. Bison's underlings. Another huge difference is that in this American-made film, he is no longer just Japanese, but instead is mixed race, becoming a character who has Japanese and both Native American and Polynesian blood. This version of E.Honda, whose home is recognised as Hawaii, is very laid back and has no desire to prove himself as one of the greatest warriors on the planet. For some reason, he also has other completely new characteristics, such as being completely immune to pain. Live action movies based on successful video game licenses are often frickin' weird. From one movie to the next, in that same year he would also be included in the animated Japanese produced Street Fighter II film. As discussed before on this channel, the Japan-made effort was much closer to the source material, with E.Honda showing up in the second half of the anime. He is driven in the movie by the same factors that drive him in the game, however now for some reason he is more cash obsessed. He's first seen in a prize fighting contest with Dao Sim in Calcutta, where he is victorious after Dao Sim is distracted by Ryu's presence. Due to taking note of this being the case and Ryu being a fellow Japanese fighter, he even offers to give Ryu half of his prize money. He is involved in a bigger fight at the end of the movie, including taking on Bison, only for him to teleport out of his path. He soon fights Balrog, where both fall off of a cliff. He seems to be unscathed from all of this though, as he is seen at the end of the movie carrying an unconscious Balrog and Guile back, just as the big fight between the heroes and villains is concluding. Perhaps the strangest animated version of E.Honda though appeared in the Street Fighter II American-made cartoon, where in this instance he is depicted as a computer whiz, capable of hacking government files. In terms of video game appearances, it would be a few years until he would resurface again, failing to be included as a playable character in the games that followed the release of the movies. He would return to the fold in Street Fighter Alpha 3, released in 1998, which would act as a story prequel to Street Fighter 2. Occurring prior to the events of a second World Warrior tournament, E.Honda is shown travelling the world looking for the strongest opponents possible in order to show off his superior strength as a sumo wrestler. In this game, Honda would gain two notable additional super combos, the Fuji Drop and the Oriki Crush. It would be here on this journey that he would meet Ryu for the first time ever, who he would even get into a sparring match with. Beating the game with E.Honda sees him finish this adventure at the Shadaloo base, where he ends up working with Zangief to destroy it. His ending shows him rescuing Bison's Shadaloo dolls and giving them somewhere to stay until they regain their memories. Past this point, E.Honda would go on to compete within multiple Capcom vs SNK games, having the opportunity to take on a whole range of new opponents. Story-wise here, he is continuing on his quest to show off the strength of sumo. He would also show up in the critically panned Capcom Fighting Evolution, but only via a cameo in the stage background, where he is seen cheering fighters on within the Japanese street stage. In 2010, E.Honda would appear in a Street Fighter IV game, debuting in Super Street Fighter IV, a revision of the title. In this game, canonically, it occurs after Street Fighter II. E.Honda decides to join yet another fighting tournament, still on his quest to show the greatness of sumo wrestlers across the world. Here he gains a brand new ultra combo known as the Ultimate Killer Head Ram, which as you can guess is a powerful sumo headbutt. His further new ultra combo is referred to as the Oriki Breaker, a powered up version of his Oicho throw. In this game he encounters series newcomer and Turkish oil wrestler Hakan, a character who is apparently an old Conrad of Honda. He also meets another newcomer in the game, Mexican Lucha Libre wrestler and aspiring chef El Therte, who he decides to educate about the wonders of Japanese cuisine. The greedy bastard. After competing in the tournament, he announces his intention to compete in the Olympics, however quickly concludes he needs to get sumo wrestling recognised as an Olympic sport first, so states he will join the International Olympic Committee to try and make this actually happen. Later, E.Honda would be confirmed as a playable fighter for the arcade edition of Street Fighter V. The events of this game would show him going on a gourmet trip with his oily pal Hakan, with the veteran pair in searching for disciples. His character story revolves around the bathhouse he owns and teaching other fighters in the game proper manners around bathing. A huge departure really from the days of trying to bring sumo wrestling to new markets. He would also make a cameo in Alex's story where he is shown as a hologram alongside Hakan attacking opponents together. A tag team match, players. Holla holla holla. Fighting wise in this one, he retains his attacks from previous games, but in line with the mechanics of the rest of the game, he gains a V skill known as the Neko Damashi. This functions as a heavy-handed clap that is capable of negating single-hit projectiles. He also has a V skill known as the Sumo Spirit, which is a modified version of his famous 100-hand slap technique. V-trigger wise, he can now perform the Onigawara, a modified flying headbutt, and can perform another variant of the 100-hand slap. To top it all off, he now has a grab technique where he can slam opponents into walls. One game we have never talked about on here, which E.Honda and other Street Fighter characters have appeared in, is this 2015 game known as Japan Sumo Cup, Yokozuna vs Street Fighter. A bizarre rhythm game that was released by Capcom to promote the Japan Cup, with the site it was hosted on sadly being closed down in 2016. This hilarious lost media features real-life high-ranked sumo wrestlers, aka Yokozuna, competing with the cast of Street Fighter in, well, horse races, of all things. You really can't make this stuff up. In fact, this game is so bizarre I might even consider making a standalone video on this strange rhythm game down the line, so let me know if you fancy seeing that one. Aside from this, just like other famous Street Fighter 2 characters, E.Honda would appear as a spirit to collect in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Out of the iconic cast that originally appeared in Street Fighter 2, the fighting game that revolutionised the genre and rejuvenated the arcade market, it may surprise you that E.Honda has made less appearances across various media than most characters from the game. One place he has shown up though is within the Street Fighter Udon comics, where they did an amazing job of showcasing what he was all about. In his appearance in these, all of his speech is rendered in red against white speech bubbles. The purpose of this was to evoke that E.Honda is so patriotic with regards to his homeland that his text in the comic was designed to resemble the colours of the Japanese flag. A technique that the artist behind the series would also use for Zangief, with his speech bubbles appearing in red with yellow text to reflect his love for the USSR. Very interesting stuff. So I guess that just about rounds up the story of E.Honda, a patriotic man wanting to spread sumo wrestling to a wider audience with a fond love of bathing and eating Japanese cuisine. We can all remember fighting this character in the bathhouse in Street Fighter 2 for the first time, and his legacy lives on in modern games another 30 years later. Sumo wrestlers do not become any more known than this one. If you enjoyed today's video and want to learn more about Street Fighter lore and the many interesting characters from that universe, then be sure to check out my extensive playlist looking at the history of a range of different fighters from these games. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscriber button and ring that notification bell. And if you're a long-term fan of this channel, make sure you let me know which Street Fighter you would like to see covered in depth on here next. Videos like these are in part made possible due to the generous support that I receive over on the Patreon platform. So if you would like to see your name in lights at the end of these videos, why not help me out by backing this channel on Patreon? Speaking of Patreon, shoutouts go out to Sebastian Velez, A Murder of Crows, Carl Johnson, Heyo Paulo Lopez, Nostalgia Collector, Ben Harradine, Koriyama Sr., Capcom vs SNK, Ron Dinch, Evan Border, Philip Namph, Azur Arkai, Jotkin Varela, Michael Calix, Ego, Jordan Durant, Angel Light 85, Ian Boyle, Nick Daniels, Princess Zana, Daniel Daly, Computer Man, House of a Ted, Gary Pinkett, ECU Professor, Johnny Holly, August Piazza, Justin Wang, Hermes Gonzalez, Instant Gratification, Monkey Man Shovel, James Bishop, JB, Michael Hall, Wesley Sang-hee, Drew Peacock, Langston Miller, Noob, Sarah Powell, Lamik Renee, Marvin Liga, T.O.G. Driver, Adrian Hannington, Bernard N.G., Dan Van Dammit, Lewis Viant, John Bates, David Bowell, Chris Fisk, Mike Bruno, Rick67, Antonio Rodriguez, Craig Jenkins, Retroversing.com, Casey Wright, Since Spaces, Punk Toast, Gunther Hendricks, and everybody else who backs what I do over on Patreon. It is greatly, greatly appreciated. Thank you.